Okay.
So you'll be in.
Good morning, fellow gardeners. We're so happy to have you here today. And this workshop is being presented by the Master Gardeners of Placer County. My name is Sue Bosworth, and I'll be the moderator today. This program is being recorded today so that it will be available for you on our website, which is pcmgucanr.org. And also you can find it under virtual gardening workshops, and it'll also give you upcoming, maybe you already know about that because you're here today. Our presenter today is Marianne Calhoun, and she sent me a little information about her so that you can get to know her a little better before she gets on with her presentation. She studied landscape design and horticulture in Portland, Oregon, and also in Sacramento. She moved to Granite Bay 8 years ago and transformed her thirsty grass property to Waterwise Gardens. She said her steepest learning curve was managing 11 irrigation zones over ½ an acre. 4 years ago, she became a master gardener, and today she's happy to share with you what she's learned. Marianne.
Thank you, Sue. All right, so again, I'm Marianne, and it's great to see so many gardeners who are interested in water, even though we had lots of water and rain out, obviously this winter. So the title of my presentation here is Improving the Water Efficiency of Your Landscape. So there's lots of different ways to go about this. Let me just go to the next slide. Susan, how do I? Oh. Am I aiming for that? There we go. All right. All right, so let's go back to the first slide. So as you know, you're here for a Master Gardener presentation, and you may know that Master Gardeners are volunteers who our mission is to impart research-based information for home gardeners. And what you may not know is that we're all volunteers, and we're trained, and we're organized by counties. So here in Placer County, we have almost 150 volunteers, which is a large number. And there are many ways that we reach out and try and help people with their garden questions. So in terms of finding us online, I'd highly suggest that you just look at our website. There's a list of all the upcoming workshops. There's you can look at previous workshops, either watch them. There's a whole bunch of things that we do, programs as well as publications. And then in terms of if you want to meet somebody in person, you can obviously come to a workshop. Another thing is we typically have a table at the seasonal farmers markets in many of the towns around here. So that's a great way to be able to talk to someone in person, as well as attending special events where we have tables. So let's find out a little about yourselves. Just you can raise your hand. But how many of you have had a free irrigation audit from your water district? Has anyone done that? Okay, we'll talk a little more. How about maintaining several inches of mulch in your garden beds? All right, about half of you. Do you have separate zones for high, moderate, and low water? Glad to see some. How many of you have upgraded to a smart irrigation controller? Okay, about half. And lastly, how many of you have downsized some of your lawn areas? All right, so really glad to see that we have some people who have done all these things. And for those who haven't, we'll talk about it. And as I said, there's lots of ways to make your landscape more efficient for water. So I've organized this into 4 approaches. So the first two approaches are really about just modifying your habits and don't cost any money. So one is about enhancing your soil. The others are about such things such as having a water audit, also having modifying how you control your controller, your irrigation controller. The last two approaches are ones that take some time and some money. So it's about investing in your irrigation system, how to upgrade it. And then lastly, downsizing your front lawn. You haven't done that. So the first approach is about enhancing your soil. So as gardeners, you most likely know that the better your soil, the happier your plants will be. From a water point of view, soil is really important for slowing the flow of the water and retaining the water on your property. So from that perspective, really encourage everybody to allow the organic materials to decompose on site. So that can be fallen leaves, it could be grass clippings, it could be when you trim plants that you cut it in small pieces and just leave it on the ground. But anything you can do, just keep the organic material on your own property will be really helpful. And the photo is a picture of, from my house, of when we've blown leaves off the driveway, we just blow it into the shrubs. And they're oak leaves and they'll decompose. Yeah. I think if you have too many inches, yes. But we recommend that you have about 2 inches. Seems to be about optimal. That's a very good question, about close to the plant place. You don't want it next to your plants. So every so often, you just need to move the leaves or mulch or anything away from your plants. Keep everyone happy. So let's talk about two ways to add to your soil. One is compost and the other is mulch. So compost is the decomposed organic matter. And it's recommended that you add it once or twice a year. So for your lawn, it's better to add compost than it is fertilizer. And this is a photo of what I do at home. I just get bags of really high quality compost and sprinkle it after I've aerated the lawn. If you grow vegetables, anytime you harvest, you do it seasonally, you want to add some fresh compost and add the nutrients back to your raised beds. Then if you grow any edible trees or shrubs, such as citrus or blueberries, again, you want to add compost once or twice a year. And then mulch is the opposite of compost. So mulch is undecomposed organic matter. And this photo, again, from my driveway, is after sadly, a large blue oak tree fell. And when the arborist came and took it all down, just simply asked them to keep chip it up and leave it in the driveway. And using a little rubber bucket took me about 2 weeks. Well, not going to hurt my back, but slowly putting it where it needed to be. Your kids drag the pile. Well, my husband's happy his bad back prevents him from helping, so I'm the one. Yes? The litter? So I am not familiar with redwood trees on our property. We have oaks and pines. I do know that redwoods need a lot of water, irrigation. And in terms of debris, I imagine you can just leave it. It's so like a forest. Yes? Good idea, thank you. All right, and then, so just returning for mulch. It's recommended these days to only have 2 inches of mulch because for Firewise purposes. So in the past, they've said, 2 to 4 inches, but these days closer to 2. but mulch decomposes, so it's not an exact science. Recommend that you put mulch directly on the soil, and that if you have any decorative rocks under your trees, you remove the rocks, which actually retain heat. They look nice, but they're not helpful, and you replace it with mulch. And then lastly, something to think about mulch is the size of it. So the coarse mulch is much more fire resistant than the shredded gorilla mulch. So something to think about. So any questions about this before we move on? Okay. So now we're going to talk about the no-cost ways that you can improve water efficiency. So the first way is to arrange for some consultations that are free. One is your water district, and the other is a professional arborist. So a water district are very happy to come to your house and give you an irrigation audit. I live in Granite Bay, and we use the San Juan Water District. So there they call it a landscape irrigation review, something like that. If you get water from the Placer County Water District, they call it a Waterwise home visit. So you just have to look on their website under services, and both irrigation districts talk about their services for people who have leaks or have problems. But if you look a little further down on their description, they're happy to come and help you upgrade and improve your irrigation systems. So that's really a great service. While they're at your house, you can ask them to test the water pressure so that you learn what is the water pressure at your house. If you don't know what kind of soil you have, clay or sandy loam, I'm sure they can help you figure that out. They will certainly tell you what current rebates there are for upgrading your equipment. And I'll talk about that in the next section about things that you have to do pay for. And then lastly, while you have someone who's an expert at landscape at your house, you might want to talk to them about their suggestions for hydrozones. So hydrozones is the technical term for your irrigation zone. And it's simply the concept of grouping your plants from high water plants, moderate water plants to low water plants. And each of those areas should have similar water needs. The plants in those areas should share similar water needs as well as sun. So any questions about that before we move on? Okay, so next, a professional arborist. So again, they'll come to your house for free. And while they're there, they can help you identify what are the trees on your property, what are the large shrubs, and what kind of condition are they in. As an arborist, they want to suggest pruning that will promote the health of your plants as well as the longevity. And in these days, it's really, really helpful to talk to arborists about how to better protect your home from fire. So I'm sure you've all heard about not having tree branches over your roof and not having big plants right next to your house. So they can talk to you more about that. All right, so modifying watering habits. Now this is where it's quite technical. And I brought a prop to help. How many know what this is? Okay, it's a roll of inline drip. And the sample I have is from Rainbird, and I'll pass it around, but there's a lot of terminology on here that you need to understand before you purchase. So to begin with, you need to understand emitter spacing. So the sample I brought is has 12 inches between the inline emitters. That's a really good drip line to use if you have a perennial bed. If you have shrubs that you want to irrigate, then 18 inches would be really appropriate. If you're just have an area that has lots of trees, you might think about 24 inches. So the emitter spacing is one element. The next element is GPH. Does everyone know what GPH is? That's your gallons per hour, which is the rate of flow of the water. And the reason that's important is depending on your soil, you will purchase different types of inline drip. So where I live, we have sandy loam soil, which is considered coarse, and 0.9 GPH, gallons per hour, is really appropriate. But if you live and have clay soil, you might consider 0.6, which is a smaller amount. And that means that you're going to be irrigating longer and slower to have the water percolate through the clay soil. Then the last element to understand is PSI, which is pressure per square inch. And that's your water pressure. And for that, you need just a little gizmo, and that's where a landscape contractor or someone from the water district will have, and they can just very quickly tell you what's your water pressure at your house. But based on all that information, what you want to plant, what's the flow of water that's appropriate for your soil, and the water pressure at your house, that will tell you how long you can run a line. So it's important to understand the maximum lateral length. So for example, with 12 inches there, my maximum in one zone is just under 300 feet. But if I'm using 18 inches, I can go up to over 450 feet. So that's a big difference. And what happens if you exceed that length, the water efficiency starts dropping off. So you really want to pay attention to all those elements. You have questions? This is the geeky part. I know. So that's before you buy your product. And then after you buy your product, the irrigation product, you want to go online and check out the manufacturer's instructions. Because then the manufacturer will tell you based on your soil and what you've just chosen as the drip line, how many minutes max should you be watering? You had a question? I've created two presentations. So this one is about water efficiency, mostly about irrigation and downsizing the lawn at the end. There's another presentation that we've scheduled in a couple of months that will be about creating water-wise gardens. June 10th. Thank you, Barbara. So if you're interested in the gardening aspects, come back in June. Okay. So the next slide here is about when you have a programming controller, when you have an irrigation controller, what are tips for programming? And this was, they sound really basic, but it's the kind of thing one learns along the way. So you first have to know what kind of soil you have. In each zone, there might be different types of soil or a mix. You definitely want to water early in the mornings before 10 o'clock. And in my property with 11 zones, I start watering in the middle of the summer at 5 o'clock in the morning, so that all zones every single day are finished by 10 o'clock. And I'll show you a schedule of how that works. For each zone that you have, you want to program into your controller what the cycle and soak times are. So the cycle times are what we just discussed based on what product you buy, say for the inline drip. The soak time is dependent on your soil. So if you have clay soil, you want to wait a whole hour before the next run time to make sure all that water goes through your soil. If you have sandy loam soil like myself, it's 30 minutes. And then we'll talk in the next slide about a regional app that's really helpful for getting some of this information. But you want to remember that the hottest month of the year here is July. Like sometimes it feels August is, but statistically July is our hottest month. So when you're programming a smart controller, you use the recommendations for how much water is needed in July to put, and then it will be prorated throughout the year. You look like you have a question. No? There is a lot to learn, yes. So my whole thing that I want to leave, you know, as we go through this is to tell you whatever adjustments you make, you know, just go slowly, pick a few things, but you want to monitor your plants, see how they're doing, and then experiment. You know, you can either water longer days in between your waterings and see if the plants are okay with that. You might want to increase the time or decrease the time. You know, there's different ways. So this screenshot is an example from the app I just mentioned. It's called Beyond the Drought. It was created a couple years ago and it's free, but it's just for the Sacramento region. And what you do is you enter what city you're in and your zip code and if there are any water restrictions. And it allows you to set up an account and list what your zones are. And then for each zone, you want to go through all their questions and put in what's your kind of plants you have, the exposure, the wind, the slope, the soil, and what's your irrigation component. Then based on all that information, the app will very quickly tell you for that current week, what's the maximum minutes to water. So that's good to know for this week, but if you have a smart controller, what you really want to know is the month of July. So you scroll down to where it says historic info, click on that, look at July, and then that number is what you put in your controller. And the controller will take care of it for the rest of the year. Right. Yes, it sounds like you have a manual controller that you're manually every month or so adjusting. Right. Yes, and we will talk about that in the next approach, which is upgrading your equipment and getting a rebate from your water district for it, which is really helpful. All right, so this is this app. You can use whatever kind of irrigation system you have because it tells you per week or per month, I guess, based on that on the weather and recent weather, what it suggests. And so this is just a recommendation. And that's where I say, start with that and then play with it and see, experiment, see what works for your properties. And then for me, having 11 zones, which that Beyond the Drought app can't handle 11 zones, it's too many. I set up a spreadsheet and I every year start a new spreadsheet, but I just find it's really interesting to learn how over time as your garden evolves. You know, some sections might need less water, some might need more as trees grow and you get more shade, or trees fall down and you get a lot more sun. You know, life changes in your garden. So this is an example of my spreadsheet and just how I track it. I put down the number of the zone. For every zone, I've given it a name. And then I put down what kind of water it uses. High water, moderate, low. And I add all the elements that the Beyond the Drought asks for. So like on the first one in my lawn, I'm saying shade, very little wind, but other like my woodland garden is full sun and high wind. So every zone's going to have different inputs. All right. So before we talk about one-time investments, so any questions about just modifying how basically you schedule and work with your controller? Yeah. Right. So that type, I don't know what they call it, but that's what landscape contractors have put down for decades. And the inline drip is what's really recommended these days. Depends on the size of the plant. So with the inline drip, when the plant's a baby plant, you want it within a couple of inches. And what's really nice about that is you just move it. You know, you have stakes and you just move the drip wherever, as you basically want, just as a general rule of thumb, it to be at the perimeter of the plant. So that might be a form of the drip line. It might be, oh, I forget what you call it. A soaker hose that you can make. A soaker hose are not recommended generally because it puts out a lot of water at the beginning, but by the time you get to the end, it peters out. So it's not evenly distributed. This type is evenly distributed and every emitter puts out the same amount, whether it's 300 feet or 500 feet. Yes? That's why these inline drips are superior to the soaker hose. But the soaker hoses are good when it's temporary and you just want something to have a really good soaking and you're there and you're managing it. This, I prefer, I felt like one of my goals when I put in this irrigation system that we have now is I want to be able to go on vacation and not worry about it. And living in a really hot climate. Yes. So I brought some, but this is what the contractor installed, which was a T component. So adding drip in different ways. I found for me, because I'm the one who does all the work, I like buying these bigger components that are called universal, because I can put the drip inside, whereas this, the drip, they're just different. This costs more money, but it's way easier for me to handle. And if I have just two long pieces, I use this one. But I've learned very quickly to pay more money and have. Yes, so I have a bag of these and a bag of these. And, you know, they cost 10, 20, I forget how much they cost. They cost the money. You buy 10 or 20 at a time, but highly suggest that you buy them from professional irrigation stores. Normac is one, right near, well, the old Green Acres is Horizon, and what's the other one? There's two that are really close together. You just Google professional irrigation store and they'll pop up. I think water districts often put on their website. Local ones are. So moving into the next topic, which seems the questions seem to be all about, is investments. How do you invest to upgrade your system? Number one is you purchase from a professional irrigation store, not going to a big box store. You can buy components there, but they're not going to be high quality, long lasting, best materials. So it's better to be upfront and get good products. Looking at the water district's websites yesterday, both for San Juan and Placer County, the number one thing they suggest, which is what I suggest, and they will give you rebates, is a smart controller. So if you have a manual controller right now, that you're the one who every week or every month is deciding what to do, look into getting a smart controller. And then you can go on vacation. You literally put in the inputs for what is appropriate for the month of July, and it will prorate every day based on the weather at midnight. It decides for the next week and the next day and the next week or two, but it constantly adjusts it every day as to how much water is appropriate. And then you know, there's ways to fine tune it, saying based on how much rainfall or wind or things, you can fine tune when it's going to water. You can get a smart controller that doesn't have Wi-Fi. I purchased one with Wi-Fi because I like the idea that I can access it from sitting in the backyard. I don't have to walk to the garage and look at the controller. I can do it from across the country. You know, I can play with what's going on, and I can look at it to see what's happening. The other thing is when you buy a smart controller, and this is, I'm not clear about if it's with the Wi-Fi or any without Wi-Fi's, but I have an online app that I'll show you an example in the next slide. But I just accessing the app and seeing what's happening on your property, that's free. But I've chosen to pay $60 more so that I can access 5 weather stations. And it's really cool. They have a map and they have little buttons as to who around you has weather stations. And you decide, do you want the free hookup to the local airport? But for me, I live next to Folsom Lake. So I've learned I want to know the people that live up and down Folsom Lake, what's their weather system saying? Because the airport's a couple miles inland and the weather is quite different. Any questions about the controller? Okay. So the next piece I would suggest is a flow meter. And a flow meter is just a little add-on you put in front of your irrigation valves. And it can cost maybe $150, somewhere around there. But what it does, it tells you every day or week or month or year how much water is coming through each of your valves in total for your property. And I saw on the Placer County website, I'm pretty sure they will give you a rebate for buying a flow meter. Yes. They're physically installed and it's just part of the piping that goes from the main water pipe before it hits the irrigation valves. So I am not a high-tech person, so I can give you general answers, but hopefully that's enough. You can do a little more investigating to learn more. Yes? The question was about the flow meter. How was that attached? Oh, the controller. I thought you meant the flow. The flow meter connects to your controller. That information connects with the controller. So I don't know the technical exactly how it does it, but it does. Another question? Uh-huh.
There's a wire
But she's asking about the specific flow meter that's put, it's a meter that's put before your irrigation valve, so that your controller knows exactly how much water is being used. That, I can't answer the question about how it gets powered. That's above my pay grade. But yeah. But I would suggest going, are you on Placer County Water District? Look on their website. They have a great website. Look first under services and then under rebates. Services. And then under rebates. And they will tell you more, and they'll give you a list. Like for the controllers, they give a list of the ones they will give you money. They're not recommending any, but they are, all of those are, I think, EPA approved, or, you know, some, there's maybe 20 of them. There's a lot to choose from. Yes? That's your water district. Yes. So every water district has their own website and their own services and their own rebate program. Yeah, but it's really helpful to know. And I only stumbled upon it because we moved to Granite Bay almost 8 years ago. I'd say, so within about the first week, I called our water district. Maybe they sent us a flyer or an email or something, you know, welcome to the neighborhood. But I noticed they had this free audit, irrigation audit. And I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about an irrigation system. And somebody came out, and he's been at our house now a couple of times. It was really, really helpful. And the Placer County Water District, to me, just has an incredible website and lots of resources and tips, and tells you about these different products. So even if you don't live in that water district, you can still go look at their website and see what they say, and what manufacturers they're discussing. Okay, so for non-lawn areas, we talked about the inline drip already. And for that, you can buy it in rolls. This size is 100 feet. You can also buy it 250 or 400, which is probably what landscape contractors buy. I personally like the 100-foot lengths because I can handle it better. You know, when you're unrolling all this tubing, you want to put it in the sun and let it warm up a little bit. Otherwise, it's really hard to unroll and work with. For your lawn areas, one of the biggest things, if you haven't done this already, is upgrading to low flow sprinkler heads. So they're what's the right word? Similar to the drip, at every single head, it will put out the same amount of water. So it's pressure regulated, and it has a very slow flow of water, whereas what people have used historically puts out a lot of water, and it's not regulated from sprinkler head to sprinkler head. So any water district is very happy to give you ideas and lead you in the right direction, and in some cases will rebate the actual sprinkler head itself. And then just one last thing I put on here, this is what I learned, but a big recommendation for growing grass and having very healthy grass is, instead of cutting it at the low height, you keep it at the highest height. And by doing that, you keep the sun from scorching the earth, you keep weeds from coming. It's just healthier practice. But in reality, on your lawn, if you have a 4-inch pop-up nozzle, you know, comes from underground up 4 inches, sometimes those nozzles don't get up and over the grass. So I found out after paying somebody to install it all, I had to have the contractors come back and put 6-inch pop-up nozzles so the water would go over the grass. Little things. There's not a lot of money, but sort of a pain. All right. So any questions about those products? All right, let's go next. Okay, here's a screenshot of the app that I use. My controller just happens to be a hunter, and the program they have is called Hydrawise. But I've set it up so that every day of the week something is watering, and I have it begin at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then I just for myself, but I've ended up putting it in blocks. And so every zone has its own color. And as I said, I name each of the zones, and then I water in blocks so I know what's happening. If you don't have that many zones, you can have it alternate, go from one zone to another, sort of make a circle. Yes? It stops however many minutes it was programmed for, and then it gives it the soak time, and that's the second. Yeah, no, that's why I do it in blocks, so I sort of know which part of the garden it's happening. Okay, good question. So this is the last approach to improving the water efficiency in your garden, is downsizing your front lawn. You know, lots of people are saying, oh, get rid of your lawn. Well, like for me, I like having some grass. You can, it's a lot of effort to do it, lots of time and money. But it will, if you're trying to not cut back on your watering, lawn is the place that uses the most amount of water. Statistically, any home uses, I'm trying to remember how this works, 60 to 75% of your potable water at your house goes to the landscape. And traditionally, most of that landscape is lawn. So it's grass. The more you water it, the more you fertilize it, the faster it grows, the more it needs to get cut. So it's sort of a cycle. So here's just some ideas on how to rethink grass, lawn. I found in this area that most of people's grass is in the front of their house. You know, in the back, they might have hardscape and swimming pools and other things, but most of the grass is in the front. So the suggestion is just go to your front door, your front window, and look around and look critically at your grass and see where's the grass thriving. So is it in full sun? Is it on a flat plane or a slope? Is it under a tree where it's shady or mossy? Are there paths that are trodden through your grass that might be a good place to have some hardscape instead of grass? So look at your grass. This photo here is of my property that when we bought it 8 years ago. And there's steep slopes down to the street and steep slope towards the house. There was really not much flat area. And you can see there's a lot of bare soil, a lot of weeds. There's not a whole lot of real grass. And then, but all this was getting irrigated probably every day, I think, for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. And all the grass ran right to the base of the trees. So we live in an area that used to be oak woodlands. So lots and lots of oak trees. So of course, over 8 years, all these oak trees are dying because the water went right to the base, which does not make them happy. So here's an idea to stimulate your thinking. If you don't have a design program on your computer to redesign your landscape, don't worry. One can simply go to Google Earth or Zillow, and you can take a screenshot of your property lines. It'll just show a grayed out area for your house, and it will show the street. And you can print that. You can print your screenshot. You can even save it and go to like a FedEx office and have it printed on a bigger piece of paper. But from there, you can just play with colored pencils or crayons and start thinking about, if you downsized your lawn, what else could you have in the front of your house? You know, do you want a space to have a patio next to the house? Do you want to screen some of the street or some neighbors? Do you want to make some changes to your pathways? Either the path to the front door or maybe through the grass where there was never one. Do you want to add some edibles like citrus trees or some small raised beds? So, you know, this is just a tool to think about what else you might have. And then as you think about your grass, your lawn, just remember, there's two things to remember. The best lawn is where it's flat and in full sun. And you're using drought tolerant grass, which is probably not the grass that you have right now at your house. And the best shape, and this is a surprise to people, is a square or a series of squares. And the reason for that is in a square, if all you had was a square in full sun and flat, you'd have 4 sprinklers, and each sprinkler head would go 45 degrees. And so 2 45s would just cover your square really efficiently. So if you create a shape that's a series of squares, that you have 2 squares, the one in the middle will do 180 degrees. So it ends up being incredibly efficient from a water point of view. And as a side thing, it's really easy to mow the grass, even though we all like curves. Aesthetically, curves are really nice. I'll show you what happens with curves. So let me jump to this photo first. So this is what we did almost 6 years ago. We had over 3,000 square feet of grass. It was on a ½ acre in the corner. And the only place that was flat and sunny ended up being about 550 feet. And there was on that ridge top, there's sort of a curve. So I made it a bigger curve. Well, that's where the lessons learned comes in. So the lessons learned after 5 years of having this is sprinklers along the curve lines are not efficient. You're constantly having to adjust it. They leave gaps, and highly recommend that you do squares instead of curves. And the other thing that I learned is what plants you put around your lawn. If you put large shrubs near your lawn, they inevitably over time create shade. And they always grow wider than it says on the label. And they need to be constantly trimmed, and you can't run your lawnmower under the shrubs. So much better to consider planting perennials or sub-shrubs. So I'll show you a photo. So this was at the beginning, and this was 5 years later, taken from the other direction. So this photo, you can see on one side are the Lamandra grasses and some perennials, just fine. But the outer curve that actually is my screen for the busy street are these shrubs that I thought were planted far enough away, and they're not. I mean, a couple times a year they have to be trimmed. And they grow shade. So our sunny lawn is not so sunny anymore. But things one learns along the way. So this is another photo looking from a different direction. This is from our front door, taken in the middle of August last year, which shows 3 zones. So the first zone, we grow these were squashes in the middle of the summer. I have a rose bush, some blueberries in the shade. And then that all gets watered just twice a week now. The slope gets watered once a week, and the flat grass on top is watered twice a week. So this is sort of an inspiration of what you can do instead of having a lot of grass. So here's a list of resources that you can find a lot more information, and that's what was on the handout if you didn't get it at the table. Yeah, the first 2 are specific to the Sacramento region. It's Beyond the Drought and Be Water Smart. Rescape is good for any place in the Northern California, and Save Our Water is really for the state of California. So all places to get lots and lots of information. And then lastly, if you are interested in plants and a database for plants, if you haven't heard of this, this California Center for Urban Horticulture, this is at UC Davis, has a website called WUCOLS, WUCOLS, and it's the Water Use Classification System. But it has thousands of plants that are typically grown in California gardens. And it will tell you information about every plant and a photo. And specifically to this purpose, it tells you, based on where you live, what region, does that plant need high water or low water plant? So really, really useful if you're thinking about new plants for your area. So here's just a quick summary of what we talked about today. So 4 different approaches. 2 really don't cost any money. One's enhancing your soil, one's modifying your habits, and the other 2 are investments, time and money, you know, both into upgrading your system or potentially downsizing your lawn. But I would say anything you do, you're going to be more water efficient. So encourage you to think about and explore and learn some ways. So before we leave today, I'm curious what other kind of workshops you would enjoy hearing from Master Gardeners. So here's a list of some of the workshops that we've presented, and I believe will so over the course of the year. But would you be interested in attending a compost workshop? Yes. How about removing the lawn? You did it. Good for you. Good. You're a convert. But she's already done it. She's already removed her lawn. Yay. So improving water efficiency is today, but this other presentation in June is going to be on creating water-wise gardens. So that's more gardening oriented. How about learning about California native plants or pollinator? You interested in that? Good. Pollinator friendly. Barbara, do we have a presentation scheduled on that?
Yes.
Yeah, so these presentations, as Barbara's saying, are listed on our website as to when they are and where they are. Recorded. Yeah. No, so that has it every 12 inches. If you look carefully, it has an emitter, so it'll have more emitters than if you have the traditional, which was put a tubing around and have these individual little emitters on skinny little things come off. Well, it depends on your area, but there's people who sell these products, like Rainbird is one example. They have design guides that are online. But the most helpful way to think about it is for any plant, you probably want 2 curves that go around that plant. You know, either coming this way or that way, but you're not, or you could have a grid system. It depends on your property and where the plant, you know, established plants are and where you want to add things. it depends, as I said, as to what's existing and what you want to add. But before you plant, it's actually helpful to just put your pots out as to where you think you want the plants, and then to put your irrigation first. And then for me, I always plant right next to it, an emitter. I look for one. In San Juan, the water district, yeah, that's a good point. They have a demonstration garden. And I actually talk about that in this other lecture, that there's a handful of ones in Placer County and even more in Sacramento, but they're called water efficient landscapes, WEL. Yeah, so one of the biggest and best illustrations is the Master Gardener garden that's in Fair Oaks. It's called the Fair Oaks Horticultural Center. It's quite expansive, been there for decades. And today? Oh, I didn't realize that. And here in Loomis, we hopefully in the next year, we'll be having a Master Gardener demonstration garden just out here where all this lawn is. All that lawn will go away. And we have a plan that's getting detailed and working its way through the process. But in the future, we're hoping that any workshops can be held here. Maybe they're inside or outside. Exactly. So. Yeah, no, those are all good questions, but it's hard. You know, you might want to hire a landscape designer to come by or a landscape contractor to come. When you do it yourself, yeah, you have to learn. But there's also lots of examples online. If you look at those resources that I've suggested, the Rescape, I believe, has at least 4 lists of types of gardens and what kinds of plants, and I think some things in there about irrigation. The Arboretum does, the one down in Davis. Yes. Mm. Who does the gardens at the state fair? The Master Gardeners? So Barbara, the question was about the annual county fair and who does the gardens. I'm talking to the Zoom.
Oh, state.
Oh, state. All right, and the answer is the Master Gardeners for Sacramento County. Since we're organized by county, they have theirs. Okay, Susan, do you want to?
Thank you, Marianne. That was very informative and sometimes a little overwhelming, but such great information. And I hope that you'll take it home with you and be able to use it in your yards and in your gardens. And thank you. Thank you for coming. And please fill out an evaluation if you don't mind. Thank you so much.